If your content system is just a list of ideas, that's probably why your content keeps getting stuck. You can have a great list idea, a content calendar, a notes app full of half-finished thoughts, and still feel like every blog post, YouTube video, email, and social post takes way more energy than it should. Because the problem usually isn't that you need more ideas. The problem is that your ideas do not have a clear path from captured to published. So in this video, I want to walk you through how to build a content workflow that actually moves instead of one that quietly becomes another place where content goes to sit. Hi, I'm Liz Stapleton, a systems-focused online business owner, and I help creators build with clarity and scale without chaos through what I like to call the creator operating system. And inside the operating system, your content workflow matters because content is not just a creative task. It's one of the main ways you can get people to discover you, trust you, join your list, buy from you, and stay connected to your business. But if the workflow is unclear, content becomes heavy fast. So a lot of creators accidentally build content systems around storage. They have a place to store ideas, a place to store drafts. They have a calendar. They have folders. They have maybe a spreadsheet or an Airtable base or a ClickUp list. But storage is not the same as movement. A good content workflow should answer one question over and over again. And that question is, what happens next? So if you have to redecide the next step every time you touch a piece of content, the workflow is not carrying enough weight. That is when you get the familiar content problems. You capture ideas, but you don't figure out which ones to actually move forward with. You choose ideas, but then they're just sitting there, you haven't outlined them. You start drafts, but they don't end up finished. You finish drafts, but then they still don't end up published because you still need graphics, a meta description, internal links. Or maybe you finally publish something, but then you forget to repurpose it or review it later. So it's just sitting out in the ether and you have no idea if it worked for its intended purposes. And none of that means that you're bad at content creation. It usually just means that your workflow has gaps. So why does content get stuck? Usually content gets stuck because each stage is too vague. For example, if you have a status called in progress, that can mean 10 different things. It could mean you're outlining. It could mean you're drafting. It could mean you're waiting for screenshots. It could mean the post is written, but it needs a featured image. Or it might mean the video is recorded, but it hasn't been edited yet. And that sounds harmless, just having an in progress status, but it creates friction because every time you go to work on that piece, you have to figure out what is happening. A workflow that actually moves uses statuses that tell you the next action, not just where the content is sitting. It tells you what it actually needs. So instead of one big in progress bucket, you want stages that make the next step obvious, like ones you can see here that I use for my blog content workflow. Now, a simple content workflow usually needs the following stages. First, you need to capture it. This is where your ideas come in before you decide whether they are worth acting on. The key here is that the ideas are not actually tasks yet. They're raw material. The second stage is where you have to choose. This is where you need to decide what ideas actually support the business right now. Not every idea deserves to become a task and a production slot. Third, you need to outline. This is where the idea becomes structured enough to create form. So for a blog post, that might be headings and key points. For a YouTube video, it might be a hook, some sections, an example, a call to action, that sort of thing. The fourth stage is to draft or record. So this is the actual creation stage. The important part is that the content has already had enough structure that you are not starting from a blank page. Fifth is you got to edit it. So this is where you improve the content, not where you redecide the whole premise. And then the sixth stage is create any supplemental materials, right? So this is a stage a lot of people forget, and that often holds up a lot of like well-written drafts that never actually get scheduled or published. So these are things like finalizing the title, coming up with a meta description, creating a featured image or a thumbnail, writing captions as need be, deciding what tags to apply, if there's internal links you want to include, sort of whatever the content needs to take it from a nice draft to actually being publishable. And then finally, you need to actually publish. And this is where assets get placed, the content gets placed in the right channel with the right metadata and links. The final stage is to review. So this is where you look back and ask what worked. So it's not going to happen, a day later. It's something that probably a month or 3 months later, once a quarter, you go back and you see how the content you created did. Ask what worked, what didn't, and then figure out what should happen next. So that's the sort of basic stages you should be using when you're creating. It's not just all in progress. So capture, choose, outline, create, edit, package, publish, and review. Now, the tool can be Airtable, which is my personal preference. It could be ClickUp, it could be Notion, a spreadsheet, or even just a very simple board. The tool is not the workflow. The movement logic is the workflow. So Once I have something that's got an outline, it then goes to outline approved, and it'll move it to the next stage of it needs to be drafted. Just an example. Now, the hidden part of a content workflow is the decision points. So a lot of people build the stages but skip the questions. So they know something is in needs outline, but they do not know what makes an outline good enough. Or they know something is ready to publish, but they don't know what has to be checked first. And that's where some bottlenecks can show up. So for each stage, I like to kind of add a decision question. At the idea stage, is this aligned with the current priority? At the outline stage, before I can say this outline is done, it needs to answer, does this have a clear promise and structure? Yes, move it right along. No, it's not done yet. At the drafting or recording stage, do I know the example that I'm going to be using to better explain the concepts? At the supplemental material stage, what does this content need before it can be published? So for this video, I need to create a couple of graphics that I'm going to add later that you are seeing. I'm going to show it again. But that needs to be created before I can actually publish it. Okay. And at the publish stage, I'm going to need to make sure I have the title, the description, the call to action, links, and all the other visuals ready. And then at the review stage, I need to see, did the asset support the goal we created it for? So those questions are what stop your system from becoming a prettier list, okay? So when you build the workflow around movement, it becomes a lot more practical. So every active stage needs three things. It needs a status, a owner, and a next action. And even if you're a solopreneur, I'm telling you, you might not be the only owner. So keep watching. The status tells you where the asset is, okay? Outline, draft, publish, schedule, whatever. The owner tells who's responsible for it right now. And that could be you, but it could also be AI. You can build agentic workflows that work with you through your workflow so that you're not having to do a lot of heavy lifting, and they will continue moving it through the process without you manually doing a bunch of stuff. Or it could be an editor, a contractor, a VA, a designer, whatever, just some kind of review gate. The next action tells you exactly what has to happen before the status changes. For example, in a YouTube workflow, an idea means it's parked. It's just in the backlog. We'll see if it makes its way. Needs outline means AI can draft an outline. Outline pending review means I need to go through it, edit it, make changes, add personalized bits about it, and then I can review it and then approve. Outline approved means that AI can go in and draft a script, or the first version of the script, rough draft. Script pending review means I need to edit and approve it. The script approved means it's ready for me to record. But one of the things it also means is that AI can go through, look at the script that I approved, and create shorts scripts. So smaller things that can kind of relate to this video that I'm recording. And so then it will move to ready to record after it's taken that and created the other scripts. Next is needs upload package, which basically is just where it needs to come up with the title, the descriptions, the tags, and the related links. And I always have AI take a first crack at it, and then I'll go through, edit, tweak. And sometimes I mention stuff ahead of time. It just depends. Needs thumbnail brief means AI needs to review the content and give thumbnail direction. Thumbnail brief pending review means I need to actually review the thumbnail copy and make sure it's up to my standards, that I think it accurately represents what the video is about, and I tweak it. It just, again, it's always easier to work on something on a page than a blank page. So that's where I'm using AI. And then from there, it will send the approved copy to my Canva template. And then I'll work on finalizing the Canva template, downloading it, etc. And on it goes. So that's the difference between kind of a workflow and a list of labels. So each status tells the system what can happen next. Let's use this video as an example. Okay. I had an idea how to build a content workflow that actually moves. Like, where do people get hung up with content workflows? And at first it's just an idea. It lives in the backlog. I'm not asking it to be a task or something that's going to be created yet. When I decide it supports the current business priority, maybe because I'm trying to do more content around systems, or I'm just trying to get this YouTube channel to have some very basic standard, pillar content, whatever the case may be. Once I decide I want it to, become an actual piece of content, I move it to needs outline. Now AI can create the outline. Once the outline exists, the status becomes outline pending review, and that tells me I'm the bottleneck now. But only for a specific decision. I don't have to go in and figure out, okay, where is this at and what do I need to do? I literally have a view in Airtable that says, scripts that need review, or outlines that need review. I have different views for tasks. So I'm not even second guessing. I know exactly what I have to do as soon as I open it. It's going to show me just the part of the record I need, which is this outline, and I'm going to review it, and I'm going to decide, I'm going to type and make changes before I finally hit outline approved. And that's when the AI picks it up for scripting. So then AI drafts a script and it moves it to script pending review. I go over to that view, I look at the script, I edit it, I make sure an example follows through and that there's like actual endpoints that make sense, it doesn't leave you hanging. And then once I finalize that script, I say script approved, which is then it's ready for recording. But sometimes, like I said, if it's a long form script, it needs to be repurposed into scripts for shorts. If it's a short script, it doesn't, it just gets straight to ready for recording. After I record and I edit it, the workflow picks it back up with the upload packaging. So the title, the description, chapters, CTA, tags, related videos, and potentially pinned content. Then there's the thumbnail brief, the Canva thumbnail design, the final upload or scheduling. And the point is that each step narrows the decision. I'm not opening a record and trying to figure out where I'm at and what I need to look at. I'm not trying to be like, okay, I can see the outline and I can see the draft. Okay, I must be working on the draft. But maybe the draft is below and I just see the outline first. I might try to review that again. Like, there's a lot of different ways you can get confused and it can just cause friction. So the workflow tells me what I need to look at, and it's only going to show me what I need to look at in that moment. So that is where automation and AI can be a huge time saver. So I'm using AI as an automated source that it goes in once a day or twice a day, or I can manually run it to say, okay, which of these statuses belong to me as AI? And then it goes and it does all of them and it moves it along. And then the next day I can pick up where the AI left off on my various pieces of content and just do what I need to do for them. So that is how the workflow actually starts moving without you manually pushing every piece forward. Now, there's a few mistakes that I would watch out for. A lot of people can make, they're easy to make. And the first is building too many statuses. So if every tiny action becomes a status, the workflow can get really exhausting. A status should usually represent a meaningful handoff, a review gate, or a next action. The second mistake is mixing ideas and active tasks. So ideas should not automatically be commitments. If your backlog or active workflow live in the same view, then everything can feel urgent when really it's not. And the third mistake is skipping review gates. So review gates are not there to slow things down. They're there to prevent the workflow from producing a bunch of assets you don't actually want to use. They keep things on track to make sure they're up to your standards and it's in the way you want it done. So it's preventing you from having to redo work down the road. The fourth mistake is optimizing the tool before you understand the movement. So you do not need the fanciest dashboard first. You need a clear answer to what happens next. Now, inside the Creator operating system, content is not just an output. It is part of how your business creates trust, builds authority, supports offers, and keeps your audience connected. So the goal is not to make content more complicated. The goal is to create a workflow where ideas do not keep getting dropped. Every asset has a next step, and you are not rebuilding the process every time you hit publish. So if you want to start finding where your content and business workflows are leaking time, go ahead and grab my 10-minute time waster audit or my content workflow exercise that I've got for you. It will help you spot the places where repeated decisions, missing steps, and messy systems are costing you more energy than they should. And if your content process feels like scattered ideas, half-finished drafts, and too many things waiting on you, start with the workflow itself, because once the path is clear, content gets a lot easier to move.